Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a new video. This one's a little bit different, not too much about the offshore space, more about the digital infrastructure that we are definitely seeing moving forward. Now, I've been at many different panels, think tanks, and CBDCs have been brought up a lot. Obviously, I work in fintech as well, very common to do this. I've also worked for 3 previous regulated EMI fintech companies where we've spoken about stablecoins, CBDCs, the likes of Ripple, for example, in board meetings with founders of these multi tens of millions of values of companies. And yeah, so they definitely have always had a strong influence on me, and I've always been very passionate about studying it, right? So what I have noticed, okay, is when CBDCs are pitched, that is central bank digital coins, we hear a lot about financial inclusion, instant payments, digitalizing cash, and keeping up with innovation. Now, it is, traditionally speaking, when we study history, common for private industries to issue private monies. So that is very common. Even you see on cruise ships with tokens. That's very normal, And central bank digital coins can only be issued by a central bank, right? Stable coins can be issued by anybody, essentially. So what we don't actually speak enough about is data. Because underneath the shiny surface of, CBDCs, digital cash, branding, even crypto and stable coins, Bitcoin, for example, is a new form of central bank money, essentially. And it is a massive data collection system. And as you probably know nowadays, the world's most expensive commodity is data, no longer oil, and the most valuable commodity as such and used. And there's 2 objectives, that we generally feel that create some tension, especially as an individual, a corporation, and a government body as well. So the more data you collect, obviously, the more useful the CBDC actually becomes for policy, risk, and analytics. However, the more data you also collect, speaking about like using a CBDC here, is the less comfortable people are with using it, and more dangerous it would become if anything goes wrong, right? So in this video, I really want to focus on CBDCs with my own background knowledge of them, and what does a CBDC actually create? How does it move through this stack of our 2025 digital infrastructure, right? Is the data leaks, is the RTGSs, the wallets, XYZ. What can a government realistically infer from it? And why I think no state should have a default real-time access to the full financial lives of its citizens. Okay, this is not an anti-central bank video. It's all about a system, design, and incentives. Right? So quick grounding when we go over things, okay? So CBDCs versus stablecoins, huge question, versus tokenized deposits even. So let's get the actual definition. So what I would say a stablecoin is a privately issued token that's designed to track the value of some reference asset. Could be gold, could be US dollars, could be pounds, okay? It's usually fiat, right? And it's backed by reserves issued under a regulatory framework that looks more like, e-money, okay? As a CBDC, it's the same balance sheet as its notes and its coins of its country, and it's represented in a ledger or a token format as tokenized deposits, or essentially bank deposits represented as tokens. Same as legal nature as a bank account, but with a bit more programmability inside financial markets and digital infrastructure. So stable coins and tokenized deposits are already very good at representing digital money. Trading, cross-border flows, B2B payments, and on-chain settlement. CBDC is different. It's more like the issuer is the central bank. The data visibility and the policy capabilities that actually come with that. Now that's where things get very interesting, and that's where they can get very risky as well, from what I've studied and my true passion in finance, right? And the fundamental design problem where things get so risky is if you're a central bank, the more data sounds great, right? Even if you're a large multinational corporation, or even my small company, more data sounds great. We can work with lots of data. But you can see how money actually moves in real time. You can understand the transmission of monetary policy more precisely, be more accurately to control the actual, inflation levels, for example, employment levels. You'll be able to control much better. You can spot stress, dislocations, contagious diseases within the financial system. And you could run a much more stricter, granular AML fraud and systematic risk analysis across the entire citizens, whether it's personal or corporations. Okay. So if you're a citizen, that exact data is complicated, to say the least. If you were giving your own data nowadays with your digital ID, which you already have, most likely, then you wouldn't even know what to do with this data. It wouldn't make sense to you. But they have the algorithms that does make sense. They probably know you better than yourself already. It's just not public. So some people will say, I trust my government, I don't care. Others, and I would say the majority of people, would be deeply uncomfortable with the idea that every small payment, every chewing gum packet, every cigarette packet, is potentially and is fully visible to the state. So there's a trade-off. More data, more policy power, and better analytics, and potentially a more efficient CBDC. As less data is higher adoption, but again, it's more like the cash feel. So nothing's actually really changed in the efficiency of running the new infrastructure. Vastly, the opportunity cost of doing this is vastly decreased, okay? So if you look around the world and live and pivot, in these CBDC areas, and but placing out a dial is vastly different, right? So some designs explicitly say there's no programmability and strict limits on data usage, as we've seen with the ECB and the World Economic Forum and other commissions around Europe. While on the other side of the party, others lean to full traceability, programmability, such as China. Okay. Now, what CBDC data actually looks like. So there's obviously different countries will have different aspects and different regulations on this, and this is why it also ties back into offshore finance. And again, if this is the first time you meeting me today, nice to meet you. I run HPT Group and I'm just about to launch CCYFX, which is our own fintech infrastructure, all in-house, regulated through a Canadian MSB license. And the HPT Group is generally what I post about on here. It does everything interlinks nowadays anyways. And HPT Group is a global advisory service. We help with asset protection plans, tax relocations, bank account onboarding, gold bullion storage, real estate advisory of looking to diversify your investments, potentially look at getting a second passport. We help with this complete offshore structuring, and helping you become a more successful and more efficient entrepreneur, closer to your true objectives of, that's usually, typically speaking, of being more sovereign, right? So, when we get back into the data of what they collect, so let's get very concrete on this point here. When you send a CBDC payment, what would actually be recorded? That's what's actually key here. That is, at minimum, every transaction will have a payer wallet ID, a payee wallet ID, an amount, a currency, a timestamp, a transaction type. Now, what do I mean by this? Maybe P2P, merchant payment, government payout, XYZ. Channel. Was it on a mobile app, USSD, card front, or hardware wallet? That's enough to draw a transaction graph for the entire economy. Now, in practice, the data always gets enriched. Legal name, national ID or passport number, tax ID, address, date of birth, phone and emails, the device identifier, maybe on the OS system that you're running on it, the screen size, so what phone are you using, the IP address, the SIM card and phone number, and sometimes even call and cell tower approximations. And then we have the other tags of the merchant gateway category. Is this a pharmacy? Is it gambling? Is it British Airways, Qatar Airways? Like, where are you spending this money on? risk scores from AML and auto fraud engines on every single payment, not when you're onboarded, right? And flags like pension payment or social benefit, right? Now, you don't need advanced AI to get all of that information and to draw actually those conclusions, right? It's vastly crazy when you really, really think about it. So then they might probably look at where somebody spends most of their money, where they work, their health profile, their religion, their politics, their social graph, their economic status. Now, scale that to an entire country for years and years and years, and that's, you know, a very cool innovation that is fantastic. Yes, as an individual, I'm probably against it. I love the current monetary system. I think it's already, way too over-compliant. There's a lack of inefficiencies within it, but obviously there has to be measures to prevent certain individuals and companies nowadays. But how that data flows through the stack is it goes through everyone. This is not just going to one government. Those wallets are using an API that then goes into maybe a potential fintech platform or software API company or simple software stack for financial infrastructure. Then you've got maybe some typical ones that I use, right? For KYC, that data's there. So your data's gone to about 20 companies. Even if it's a CBDC, I guarantee that these governments do not have the infrastructure to create their own internal software that is already there by multinational corporations, from Microsoft to SumSub, as a prime example for SDK Finance, for example, if you're looking at making a fintech, or AdverPay, right? There's loads of these, okay? So all of its data will be fed into a database, but while it's being fed into that database, well, the data they want, the data's always been leaked to those companies right there. So that is probably the main concern for someone like myself, and if the true population understood the power of CBDCs and how that could turn into a state that we might look at like China today, where, money is completely controlled by the government. You can be penalized if you have a speeding ticket, you which to me sounds okay. But then what happens when you have free speeding tickets and now you're not allowed to eat beef because you've eaten your beef quota, or you can't have that packet of sweets, or for example, I've got some lovely little Danish cookies in front of me, and can I buy these, or have I reached my sugar quota? You've got to think, beyond the next 10, 15 years. And yeah, but they can already see this data, right? So it's a really big different power balance, because the banks don't actually, they have to an extent control over your bank accounts, right? But there's fragmented versus centralized systems. So data is scattered across many institutions, multiple banks, multiple EMIs, card schemes, processors, in different jurisdictions, different IT systems, different legal regimes. Getting full coverage is awfully very hard and slow and awkward for governments. A CBDC platform would be the core ledger, the APIs, the analytical flows, right, and the schema. It's, especially retailers to centralize all these payments. So, again, we could have a look at all of this and speak about it for absolute hours, which I would love to. It's my pure passion, is, looking at finance in the world moving forward today is very, very, very interesting. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a cigarette. It's a very intense video. But, okay, would you be happy with all of this moving to one coherent data set from one core ecosystem? That's a big change in philosophy of the mind, or, the mindset of the people, right? Especially with how the world's been moving the past 25 years, if not 100 years. I mean, people say the UK is the worst it's ever been in life, but to be honest, I've spoken to people who are 60 years old, and I said, no, it was much more crazy when we were, out in Birmingham as kids. It was ruthless. You couldn't even go to Broad Street, and now you can walk on Broad Street fine. Yes, there's a few stabbings. But years ago, it was a lot worse than that. But, okay, bulk, real-time, personal level across the entire world is exceptional. The infrastructure to even provide this is astonishing, and it would be amazing. But it's naive to think that this is for the benefit of the people. It would only, in my perspective, harm the people. And we've seen the digital ID rollout in the UK. And most people, I think it's the third or fourth largest petition in the world for this to not go on. So my question is, if the country really rejects a digital ID, then most likely they are going to be rejecting a central bank digital currency, because information is shared so fast that yes, they can control and censor, and they choose what is on your phone. But at the end of the day, most people are pretty switched on nowadays. But potentially, as we saw in C19, people were getting free burgers for you-know-what. So maybe they give a freebie and people can't wait to sign up to a CBDC and switch their banking infrastructure. But the realistic abuse that we will get from this, from governments into our play, I would like to argue would outweigh the benefits and the operational ability of using it as an individual or corporation. I would really feel that the seesaw is in their favor, and the benefits are pretty minimal. We already have, if you use Wise, you use Revolut, you use other EMIs and banking infrastructures or stablecoins right now. Money is fast. It's no longer those 4 or 5 day waits we used to have years ago. It is now extremely fast, especially on stablecoins, right? It can be within 2 to 3 minutes. So, and that's across borders. So potentially, if every donation in CBDC is linked to a verified identity, it lists everyone who's ever supported a particular party, NGO, media outlet, protest movement, or party, map their funders, their staff, their partners, their suppliers, and flag the network as high risk. Now, you don't need to outlaw anything, you just would slow their payments, demand extra checks, and make everyday life more difficult under a compliance narrative. Okay, so they would obviously have your risk models, it would affect your credit score, and customer segmentation. They would segregate customers into different groups of people and society. Now that is bloody scary. That to me does not sound like, I don't know what democracy means by definition, but it doesn't sound like that. Okay. And again, tax systems would be deeply integrated within this. So all your payments will be tracked, and that's fine, you don't mind paying tax. But it's really, when you think about this, are CBDCs inevitable? Yes. But when we look at it, is generally private institutions have historically issued money, and it's not just like a one-size-fits-all. Every country is going to be slightly different in regards to their own legal systems. And I do think it is beneficial for the world, but I think there has to be protocols and there has to be some power within corporations or people instead of a government. So the question is it stablecoins or CBDCs? It is both. I think they'll both be used for their own purposes. But hopefully that gives you a nice rundown, especially if you've never even heard of CBDCs, right? So if we are going to issue CBDCs, how do we design them? And how does it become an infrastructure where it's not financial surveillance? Or is that the entire point of CBDCs? Is the innovation just a front for the surveillance that's about to be coming to the global population? So, cheers guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and it's nice comments on CBDCs.